Welcome to Travelers Rest and Winter Storytelling. Travelers Rest State Park and Travelers Rest Connection are celebrating our 25th anniversary this year, as we also commemorate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of the Independence and the founding of the United States. But history did not begin in 1776. Travelers Rest acknowledges that we're gathered here today on the homeland of the Séliš and Kellis Bay people at a place they named Timsum Clee, and where they have lived since time immemorial. Their example as the original stewards of this land guides our work today. We're committed to respectfully sharing the history and contemporary culture of the Indigenous people who lived and traveled through this ancient crossroads. And we learn from many Indigenous artists, elders, and organizations. We invite you to learn from and support them as well. A quick thank you to everyone who makes these programs possible, including the members of Travelers Rest Connection, MCAT, Missoula's community media resource, who provided a media assistance grant to record winter storytellings and to help broadcast them on Zoom, and Montana Public Radio for their promotional sponsorship. I also want to acknowledge the Montana 250 Commission for a grant that supports programs during this anniversary year. For folks on Zoom, it's helpful if you keep yourself muted and your video off during the presentation. But if you have questions for our speaker, please type them in the chat box, and we'll monitor that for questions or any technical difficulties you might have. Okay, that's the business. Now's the fun. We are thrilled to welcome back Austin Haney. Austin has worked in public history interpretation at a variety of private, state, and federal institutions, including the Blaine County Museum, Lewis and Clark Foundation, the U.S. Forest Service, U.S. National Park Service, and the Historical Museum at Fort Missoula. An avid collector, Austin graciously shares the many historic treasures he has picked up in his travels. He is also well known for hats and haberdashery. How's that? Austin just finished his first week as Education and Programming Director at the C.M. Russell Museum in his hometown of Great Falls. And we are so grateful he was able to make his way over the mountains to be here today. Austin.
All right, time for some fishtails. So, I'm actually kind of glad that there's so many people out here on a blustery January day, and that it's kind of our first real snap of deep cold weather. Otherwise, you guys might be out ice fishing, right? Well, to get this program kicked off, I want to see a show of hands really quick. How many of you folks love to go fishing? All right, raise your other hand if you prefer going hunting. Oh, brave souls, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I'm kidding there, folks, but I think it's not controversial to say that people have loved fishing for a very long time. And Lewis and Clark, their expedition is no exception. As a young kid growing up in Great Falls, we were surrounded by a couple things. A whole lot of prairie, mountains way off in the distance, and a whole heck of a lot of Lewis and Clark. So it was only natural, as the son of parents who loved to go fishing from a family that loves to go fishing, that I would be drawn to the story of fishing with Lewis and Clark. And I was really surprised at just how cool of a story it really is. I'm sorry, there's going to be a ton of fish puns and jokes in here. You're just going to have to, adjust and swim along with me. So, without further ado, let's dive into this story, guys. So, I'm not going to take us back quite to the very beginning of fishing, but we're going to go somewhere pretty darn close. So, how many of you have ever heard of The Complete Angler by Isaac Walton? It's kind of the fisherman's Bible. It's one of the earliest times somebody had set down in writing just what fishing means to people. It's more than just food. It's more than just a way to get outdoors. It's something that I think really speaks to a really beautiful part of the human spirit. And any of you who've gone fishing, I think you understand that feeling. It's hard to put into words. But again, the contemplative man's recreation, as Walton says in his book. And I know he kind of looks like the Quaker Oats guy, but that's Isaac. So, you notice that fishing tackle there, by the way. Does it look kind of familiar? I mean, he's got his net, he's got his creel. The thing that we're going to find throughout this journey is that fishing through time, the experience of it, the ideas behind it, they really haven't changed. It's just our toys have gotten a little nicer materials. And speaking of, by the time Lewis and Clark roll around, Isaac Walton was as distant to them as they are to us. So we've got 200 years, on either side of these guys. So it's a great period that you can examine to see just the development of fishing tackle. And really, when Lewis and Clark are about to set out on their journey, fishing as we know it is experiencing a really interesting crossroads. For a long time, all the way back past Walton's day, if you wanted to fish with a rod, you simply, most of the time, just cut one by the stream, and there you go. A lot of people would make purpose-built fishing rods of single piece, finely sanded, carved, and set for fishing. But by the time of the expedition, around 1800 or so, this is the first time we're seeing jointed rods. This is the beginning of bamboo being imported from Southeast Asia to make fishing rods as well. So before that, it was all hardwood. Now, any of you fishermen out there, I want you guys to imagine just how sensitive an oak rod might be, or lack thereof. So, huge advancements in fishing technology are on the horizon. It's just right in the baby stages so far. So, what are some other things we see there? Do we have any fly fishermen in the room? Yeah, okay, so I really should mention that fishing is broken up into two schools of thought. There's angling, modern day fly fishing, and coarse fishing, which is more kind of bait fishing as we would know it today. So fly fishermen, can I have a brave volunteer if you can read the flies on the wall, right? Do you recognize some? Yeah.
We have ant fly, palmer, green drake.
Who's heard of a green drake before? Who's fished with one? Absolutely.
Great dun.
Anybody fish with that? Great dun. Hey?
Dun cut.
What about a hawthorn? Anybody? But notice, that woodcut is over 200 years old. In fact, it's closer to 300. And there are people who just raised their hand in this room who fished with that kind of fly. There's some great continuity here. Any of you folks who are bait fishermen, what does that little thing at the bottom right of the screen look like? Kind of looks like a minnow, might look a little bit like a spinner or a spoon. What you're looking at is the great, etc. grandfather of modern day spoons, and you could even make a case for lures like the Rapala and things like that. It's very much in the beginning stages, but it's coming. It's here. And I think that's what's so fascinating about fishing at the time of Lewis and Clark, is you're really on the cusp of modern fishing tackle as we know it. And of course, for most of that history, you might notice there's no reel on the end of that guy's fishing pole. But this is the beginning of fishing reels. So I actually have a real one right here. Get it? It's a real reel. So this one is not quite as old as Lewis and Clark's reels, but it's effectively identical. This one dates about to 1830 as far as I've been able to track it down. And it's pretty simple. They're single gear, brass, usually made by watch and clock makers. Early on, they're called fishing winches. And you might notice the one on the slide, what's kind of weird about the base of that reel? Wing and nut. It's got a spike that goes through a hole in the rod, and tighten the wing, and boom, there you go. Is that a good idea? Not necessarily. So by about the time Lewis and Clark and afterward, you get the first clamp foots that we still use today. And I've got a whole ton of fishing gear up here. I'm literally set to go fishing like Lewis and Clark right now, believe it or not. So I encourage you guys after the program, please come up to the table. Let's check out some cool stuff, because let's face it, fishing gear is kind of small and hard to see with me holding it up over here. So when we're talking about fishing with Lewis and Clark, I'm mentioning all these really cool inventions. If you are a 30-some-year-old Army captain tasked by the President of the United States to go across the continent by water, you might need some fishing gear, right? You're also a government employee. Are you going to buy all this newfangled, fancy, expensive stuff? There's a lot of continuity in this story. As a former Fed, I got to yank the chain sometimes. So Lewis, when he's preparing for the expedition, he doesn't buy all this fancy stuff. He goes with the tried and true. Coarse fishing. And it's pretty darn simple. Hook, line, floats, sinkers, it's bait fishing. You don't even need a rod. Because if you look there, that's one of my favorite historic fishing images. It's a sailor in the 1780s clinging onto a cannon on a ship for dear life, dangling down a hand line, seeing what he can get that's not going to drag him overboard. And it's pretty darn simple. The things that you need to go coarse fishing literally can fit in the palm of your hand, in a pocket, in the bottom of a bag, whatever you've got. So coarse fishing, it's pretty easy to transport. It's pretty darn cheap. And so Lewis is going to buy coarse fishing gear. He buys several different weights and kinds of lines, buys several hundred fish hooks, various floats and weights, and the single most important piece of fishing gear in any angler's tackle box, a whiskey flask. So this is a sportsman's flask. It's made out of pewter. There were 3 different kinds of flasks he might have bought. One was glass and looks just like a typical flask. Another was shaped like a fish. Those were very popular between 1800 and about 1820. I kind of wish it was that one. I'm probably not going to be able to buy one of those because they become expensive Americana pieces. But I went with the pewter because these are still cheap online and they're very indestructible. So, I'm thinking like Captain Lewis. Just as a quick tangent, the little black box that you see filled with coarse fishing gear, tying it back to that 250th, that was owned by George Washington. So don't let any fly fisherman tell you that he was a fly fisherman. No, he was a bait fisherman. So we've got our fishing tackle. We're heading out up the river. Well, in this case, the first rivers they're going to encounter, they're going down. It's the Ohio and the Mississippi. And this is really the first fishing that is going to be done on the Lewis and Clark expedition. And unfortunately for all of our fishermen interested in personal bests and records like that, they catch their biggest fish literally almost right off the bat. So it's only downhill from here. And that first big fish that they catch is right where the Ohio and Mississippi combine. This was a identical fish that was caught very recently. I think that's the 2024 state record for Tennessee, just below the mouth of the Ohio. That one right there was 120 pounds. How big do you think Lewis and Clark's catfish was? Oh, a little lower than that. I see we've got some real fishermen in this group, though. So if Lewis and Clark had caught their fish today, they would have beaten that record by 8 pounds. Yeah, 128 with a hand line. So if you've never seen a hand line work before, Well, now you have. It's quite simple. You just stand upstream of where you want to fish, let out enough line to give it a good little toss. Current takes it. You keep letting your line go till you got it where you want it, and just wait. So I've actually fished with this stuff, by the way, and somehow I have caught fish. One of my fondest memories, the Lewis and Clark annual meeting was in Billings one time. This was almost 10 years ago. And I was fishing, like Lewis and Clark down below Pompey's Pillar, and I found a beautiful spot. And with this very hand line, I ended up catching 3 catfish. They weren't 128 pounds, though. 130. Just wink, wink, wink. So, hook myself while I do that. So, the way it works, you can have horsehair, silk, or gut leaders. Heavier lines are made out of hemp. Some lines in general are made out of things like horsehair, particularly fly lines. But there's literally no end to the variety of lines you can get. Basically, if it's a natural fiber at the time, you can probably fish with it. So, Lewis unfortunately doesn't specify exactly what he got. He just says various weights and kinds of fishing line and then leaders. So we just have to assume. So, meeting the Missouri River. Yep. As someone who grew up on the Missouri, accurate. So this is really when fishing comes into play. They do a little bit on the Ohio and Mississippi, but it's only once they start getting out on the Missouri and into unknown fisheries that things really start to get fascinating. And one of the first species they encounter is the channel catfish. See, that one that I showed you way down at the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi, that's a blue catfish. They are massive critters. Channel cats, not so much. So these guys, particularly up here, they average maybe 5-10 pounds as a monster. A little bit further down in Nebraska, I think they can get about 3 times that size, but they're not as big as a blue. There still is a pretty darn decent population of these guys in the river. But I think the fun part about Clark's description of the channel catfish is he says that its tail is deeply forked like a dolphin. Bet you didn't know that William Clark knew about dolphins. Some people still believe that those things were a fish at the time, but, science moves slowly. You got to fish to get a lot of these and to learn about it. And one of the most interesting methods of fishing that they do in Nebraska on the lower Missouri, it's one that's very frowned upon today by FWP, so guys, don't come after me. It's called a brush drag. And so it's extremely simple to make. The young fella off to the left side of the brush drag there, that was his first one. He didn't really know what he was doing. It's me. And I can make a much better one now. But the simple idea is you can cut, wood, cut brush out of the banks. There's a crap ton of willows. You make a simple little square frame. You tie your uprights, and then you can weave in the brushy bits on the side. You're basically making like a brush net, almost. And what they do is they make enough of these to go across the width of a creek or a small little river or whatever it was. And it's extremely easy to do. If you set a couple guys at this, you can get a big enough brush drag in about 2 hours. So you go down, you go against the current, and you have guys beating the water above, scaring the fish into the brush drag. Whatever you don't want, anything small enough to get through your brush drag, you don't want to eat anyways. And it's pretty effective fishing. So they talk about using brush drags a couple times on the expedition, including here in Montana and once in Idaho. But their biggest catch was down in Nebraska. How many fish do you think they could get with a brush drag like that? A couple hours. How many fish do you think you could get? More. Slap a 0 on some of these numbers.
300.
So in Montana, they record a couple times dragging out at least 500 fish. They got 800 in Nebraska on one of their brush drags. Forgive me and my historic fishermen of our sins, FWP. If I see anybody in the news using this method and they get caught, you didn't hear it from me. So, you'd periodically take it out. Yeah, not all in one go. Like the world is a rich place at the time. It's just not that rich. So, who the heck is doing the fishing on this expedition? That's a very good guess. Everybody. Yeah. A lot of people did. We have documented records. I read literally every page in those journals looking for fishing references for this program. And after doing this for almost a decade now, I think I've got all of them. But I found reference that Lewis personally fished. Clark personally fished. So did Sacagawea. So did York. Sometimes at the same time, sometimes in different pairings and groupings. But there's one man on the Lewis and Clark expedition who stands out as the primary angler above all others. He is an interesting character, and I'd like you to introduce you to him. Wait. What? That can't be right. There we go. Meet Silas Goodrich. Who knows something about Silas Goodrich? New England, yep. We know he was from New England, and we know he liked to fish. That's about it. So he's one of the more unknown members of the Lewis and Clark expedition, and a guy I've had an interesting walk through history with in the last 10 years. So I'll talk about this a little more in the program, but growing up as a kid in Great Falls, one of the things I did at the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center was get really involved in the Lewis and Clark Honor Guard. They were a reenacting group that, well, long story short, we dressed up and pretended to be Lewis and Clark on the weekends. And everybody got a role. Everybody got a character. And I was given Goodrich. And imagine poor little, 13-year-old me being very disappointed that we know nothing about this guy. We'll get to that. But he's described, when he is mentioned in the journals, it's almost always in connection with fishing. He's called by Lewis a fine fisherman. He's remarkably fond of fishing. It seemed like more than anybody else on this trip, this was his way of relaxing at the end of the day. This is his passion. And yeah, he's somebody that I've really tried to bring back into history. So, much like Goodrich kind of gets pushed to the side and lost in the shuffle in the river there, so does fishing. Because let's face it, you're out in the West, you got 40, 50 million of these critters running around. And if you're trying to feed a big group of people, are you really going to spend a couple hours getting your pants wet in the Missouri River trying to catch enough fish to feed 30 guys? When you could literally, send one guy, take a little stroll on the prairie, boom, you've got dinner for the next 2 days. So, much like Lewis and Clark rely on hunting, so do the indigenous peoples in the Great Plains region. I mean, it's just simple math. It's more worth your time and energy to hunt bison than it is to fish. But that's not to say that they didn't. It's this common belief that plains cultures don't have fishing traditions of their own. And while it's true that many of them don't, many of them do. And one of the most interesting that Lewis and Clark encounter, but they didn't really know about it because they were there at the wrong time of year, are the Earth Lodge village cultures of the Mandan and Hidatsa. And this is a wonderful image taken about a century after Lewis and Clark of a Hidatsa fisherman heading into the Missouri to trap some catfish. And it's fascinating technology. I want you guys to remember this picture and remember that basket, because it's going to pop up again with another group of people hundreds of miles away. If you were to look at traditional fish traps in Wales, they wouldn't look that different. Vietnam, China, anywhere in the world that people fish, the technology is not too different. And I think that's something really special about traditional fishing. So keep that picture in your mind, okay? But back up the Missouri River we go. We are entering uncharted fisheries. And 1805 is really when things get fun as far as fishing on the expedition goes. And this is really where you start seeing Goodrich pop up and making an impact on the journey. And in particular, the area around the Marias River confluence and my backyard, but we'll get there in a minute. So they show up at the mouth of the Marias. They weren't expecting it, and so they're going to camp for a couple days. And of course, anytime they're stopped for any particular amount of time, that's almost always when you start seeing Goodrich pop up. He's got time to fish and really make an impact in the water. And while they're down at this camp by the Marias River, Sergeant Ordway, who was Goodrich's commanding NCO, he was in his squad, he writes that, Goodrich has caught a great plenty of fish, but as we have an immense quantity of meat, we do not trouble ourselves for to catch fish. Literally, for to catch fish. Sometimes I think their speech is as slippery as the fish they're catching. So, the way that Goodrich is catching fish down at the mouth of the Marias is kind of interesting. Ordway also mentions 2 new species, as well as shellfish. The guy is looking for mussels. I mean, he's from Massachusetts. Of course he knows how to do that. And the way he's getting a lot of these fish are with a seine net. So basically, this is one of the few times a seine net is mentioned on the journals. But basically, you've got a net that you throw out. It's weighted on the bottom, floats on the top to keep everything, separated and not confusing. And you just draw that net in. And whatever you've enveloped, that's what comes with it. It's a terrible tangled mess to try and clean up afterwards because, you don't have this nice packaged net anymore. You got to repackage it. It's like parachutes. But it's one of the few times they ever do this. And this is a wonderful illustration of seine netters on the Rhine River, right about the same time as Lewis and Clark. So, again, fishing technology is remarkably consistent wherever you are at in the world. So those 2 species that I mentioned are kind of interesting. You can still catch them in good quantities, at least one of them, down by the mouth of the Marias to this day. And I can remember as a little kid, and all through up until the last couple years when I was living on this side of the river, well, not the river, but the mountains, I can remember going and fishing for these guys. And these 2 fish are some of my earliest fishing memories. Of course, we've got sauger and goldeye. I wonder why they call the goldeye. Sauger, yep. So sauger on the left and goldeye on the right. If you've never had goldeye, by the way, it's really good smoked. Don't eat saugers. They're a species of concern. Like, throw them back, please. That's my fishing PSA. But continuing onward up the river, this is my favorite fishing story with Lewis and Clark. So the whole premise behind stopping at the Marais is they're trying to figure out which river is the real Missouri. See, they'd been told that, oh, there's only one northern tributary, it's no big deal. You know, you'll find this waterfall and you'll know you're almost in the mountains. Problem is, you got the Milk River and then you got the Marais. That's not one, that's two. And so they face a little bit of a pickle. We got to find that darn waterfall. And they had pretty much decided by the time they set out that, all right, we're going to go with the South Fork. Waterfall's got to be there. And so Lewis assembles a small little team of 4 guys to accompany him and find the Great Falls of Missouri. And one of those 4 is Silas Goodrich. And they're waking up on the morning of the 13th. Lewis, literally for the past 3 days, every day he's mentioning that this Goodrich guy, he really likes fishing. That's all he's doing anytime we stop. He also mentions what he's fishing with, but I'll ask you guys that in a little bit because it's kind of fascinating. So they're waking up the morning of the 13th of June. He sends the other 3 guys out to hunt. Keeps Goodrich with him because, well, I hate to say it, but Silas kind of sucks at hunting. And so he's kind of going to be the partner in crime for walking today. I can probably imagine he's probably carrying all the heavy stuff, but, officer's privilege. And they're going down, they're north of Great Falls today, and they see something that looks like smoke coming up out of the river channel. They rush forward for another couple miles, and wouldn't you know it, there it is. The Great Falls of the Missouri. And while Lewis sits on this little cluster of rocks that you can still go up to today, it's a really, really cool spot. What do you guys think Goodrich is doing? Yeah, he's on the other end of the island. He's fishing. You know, because that is an amazing fishing spot right there. I mean, look at all those eddies and the turbulent water there. That is a buffet for fish. Speaking of, I gotta. Coffee is my buffet. And by the time Lewis is done, he's spent a little bit of time, penning this beautiful passage. You can still read it today. He starts complaining that, oh, I'm no artist, and I wish I could draw this, and da-da-da-da-da. And by the time he's done being all whimsical and philosophical and, Lewis things, comes down off the rocks, and wouldn't you know it, Silas has got dinner sitting on the bank. And Lewis writes that it's a new fish that they've caught. It's, according to Lewis, it greatly resembles, that was in the journal, by the way, greatly resembles our mountain or speckled trout in shape and form, but notes that it's got a really peculiar red mark coloration on the bottom of its jaw. What kind of fish is this? You're darn right it is. Montana's state fish, caught for the first time in documented history by Silas Goodrich at Great Falls, Montana. So, the scientific name of the cutthroat trout, does anyone know what it is? Darn right. Forgive me my pronunciation, but it's Oncorhynchus clarkii lewisi. I hope by the end of this program you will all agree to sign my petition. I have it in my bag. We're going to rename the cutthroat trout to Oncorhynchus Silas Goodrichi. So, Great Falls is an interesting place not just because of the fish that they caught there, but because it's really a important marker in river ecology. So below the falls, the Missouri is a warm water fishery. You're going to catch, sauger and goldeye, catfish. It's a warmer, more turbid, muddy stream. Above the falls, this is a mountain river. This is blue ribbon fly country that people today, still pay thousands and thousands of dollars to come and fish. And this is where they start getting a problem, because they have perfect gear for the lower Missouri. They're set up for warm water fishing. But once they get above the falls, the river gets a little too clear. Clark himself writes in his journal that, we see plenty of fish in the river, but they won't bite at any bait we give them. So they are really facing a conundrum as they're heading up the Missouri. They're leaving the land of the buffalo. They're not having much luck with fishing, so they're getting a little nervous here. It's on the beaver head that they're going to pull out a brush drag again. So super important as far as what's going on and what's not working. And it's going to become incredibly important that they learn how to get fish really soon, because they're heading over the Continental Divide. You don't have those 40 to 50 million buffalo running around. That's basically Walmart on the hoof. You're going to have to work for dinner now. And when they cross the Continental Divide, one of the first things that Lewis notes when he meets up with the Shoshone is, he's given a piece of dried salmon. And for him, that was when he knew he was on the waters of the Columbia. A piece of fish. And really, the salmon, I cannot overstate how important these things were, both to Lewis and Clark and to everybody in the area. One of my favorite quotes about salmon, I believe it's a Yakima chief, about 80, 90 years after Lewis and Clark, but he says, "My blood is from the fish, my strength is from the fish." Like, this is literally the lifeblood of culture on the west side of the divide, where salmon are found. And this is the buffalo. This is the equivalent of the buffalo for these people, swimming up in similar numbers every year. So, remember what I said about those fish baskets? Does that look familiar? What you're looking at is a Kootenai example taken 50 years after Lewis and Clark left the area. That picture is a rare survivor. It's one of the few from that period, and it's probably the closest we are ever going to get to seeing what a fishing culture, a village, just normal life would have been like in the camera from that era. And wouldn't you know it, it's pretty darn similar. Baskets are made almost the exact same way. This one's just a little longer. It's got more support hoops. But at the end of the day, if you took a Hidatsa fisherman and gave him that basket, he'd know exactly what to do. You'd give that basket to a fisherman somewhere in Europe, Africa, Asia, they'd know what to do with it. And I think that's pretty cool. So, who knows how these things work? Anybody? Only one. Oh, two. I better be seeing all you little what are you guys? AmeriCorps? Yeah. You guys should know this. You work here. Come on. I like teasing people and joking around. It's all good. But the way the baskets work is there's a integral cone inside that you can take out that is basically just a mini version of the basket in reverse. It's got a hole that the fish can swim through. But the basket is designed so the fish cannot turn around, and if they do manage to, them little sticks poking out there, it's going to convince them, I might want to stay in this basket. It's a little safer. Don't do it. But this right here is a really fun example of a modern fish weir that utilizes those baskets. So you can see it's much like the brush drag, but permanent. It's a barrier in the river that, fish that are big enough, well, you're going to have a hard time getting through that. And if you really, really want to be selective about your fishing, Notice the cute little gates on there? You know, all you got to do when you want to go fishing, you put your basket in there. You don't want to take fish, you open the gates, you can take the basket out. There you go. I have an interesting time talking with people about fishing because compared to hunting, inherently, fishing's kind of lazy. Like, it's about working smarter, not harder. And indigenous fisher folk were geniuses when it came to maximizing your catch while expending the least amount of effort. Because this is about food, folks. So there's kind of an interesting tangent that ties to Traveler's Rest here. Who's heard of Old Toby? Yeah, the Shoshone guide. How do you think he was lost? He wasn't lost. Lewis and Clark will tell you, oh, he got lost and he missed the trail. Oh, no. There are many different Lolo trails. There's little branches. It's more like a braided river with different channels and chutes and offshoots versus one singular, beaten trail that is like a modern road, And so my best guess, understanding the situation, these guys are in hard times. They're, running low on food. They're not finding any game. I mean, it's September in the Rocky Mountains. It's not exactly, prime elk season, and you're wandering around like the Blackfoot Clearwater game range, and they're all around you, but you can't do anything. Totally not venting there. But what probably happened was Toby didn't get lost. He didn't take them off the right trail. He was trying to feed those guys. Take them down, a Séliš branch that would lead to a fishing spot, because they talk about, oh, there's weirs down here. Oh, that's kind of cool. Not even realizing what is going on. It's like the clueless tourist, in the Vatican being like, oh, pretty frescoes, and they don't realize that they're looking at, some of the coolest pieces of artwork in the world. But I digress. But the long story short, the point is, the Lolo Trail, there's no salmon there that time of year. They're not doing good. I mean, they're eating portable soup. They're eating candles. They're getting desperate. And they stumble down into the land of the Namipu, the Nez Perce, more dead than alive, as Ken Burns' documentary would say, and that I am shamelessly riffing off of. But they get down to the Nez Perce villages, and wouldn't you know it, they are resuscitated with the staples of Nez Perce food culture: salmon and camas. Now, salmon at the time is kind of interesting because doesn't that look tasty? Oh my God, my mouth is watering thinking about it. But you would dry it either in the sun or with a fire. Smoked salmon, pretty darn good. But then you would take it most of the time and then pound it into almost like anybody had like jerky powder? Yeah, so pemmican is made almost the exact same way. In this case, it's fishican. But you add some fat to it, you add some extra goodies like berries, and it is a fishy protein bar. Now, whether that was exactly what they were eating at the time, they're not really specifying. Pounded salmon comes up again later in the journals, but they mention getting ungodly sick from their feast. Now, some caveats. They're already eating on an empty stomach. I think any food whatsoever was going to really mess with them. And number two, no fault of the cooks. This is 1805, people. Food service industry standards do not exist. There is no refrigeration in 1805. This stuff is just sitting out with open access to all the creepy crawlies and bacteria and the little critters of the forest. You might get some funky fish. And to top it all off on this delectable feast, I mentioned camas. Who knows about camas? So, if you don't know about camas, picture like a little tiny tulip bulb. And you roast them in the earth for several days, and they actually taste pretty good. When I used to work for Nez Perce National Historic Park, I got to eat camas quite a bit. If you've ever had like fruit leather or like dates, it kind of tastes like that. But in the words of one Jesuit priest who was at St. Mary's Mission, camas is a very tasty food, but it is accompanied by certain sounds and smells. It's effectively a mild laxative if you're not used to it and you eat too much of it. So picture like the bean scene in Blazing Saddles. That's literally Lewis and Clark while they're down there. Clark himself writes in his journal, "Our meal filled us so full of wind, we were scarce able to breathe all night." I mean, just the combination of there's probably some cases of food poisoning. These guys are eating on an empty stomach. They're eating a mildly laxative root. These guys are miserable. And who's had food poisoning before? Yeah, does it suck? Guess what? It did in 1805 too. And how long did it take you guys to be brave enough to try the food that made you sick again? Yeah. So needless to say, these guys are a little apprehensive about salmon and camas. They're going to eat it because they're going to have to. But these guys are used to eating these juicy, pieces of buffalo meat out on the prairie. They want something good, red-blooded American meat. Come on, let's go. And so they start wasting away their supply of trade goods for dinner. Oh, I purposefully chose the cutest picture of puppies I could. They were buying dogs on the way down the Columbia for dinner. All because they couldn't get themselves to embrace salmon fully. They're in the middle of the greatest salmon fishery in the world. And they're having dog for dinner. Somebody took the time to count this, by the way. Interesting master's thesis, I bet. But 193 dogs were eaten on the Lewis and Clark expedition. Cue the Sarah McLachlan and the odds of the yeah, that's just woof.
Change the slide! Change the slide!
So, fueled by their diet of dog, camas, and fishican, they are racing down the Columbia to get out of this place. They are not having a good time, and they are taking risks that they normally wouldn't dare, including shooting through the rapids and falls that make up one of the greatest single fishing places in the world. Say hello to the Great Falls of the Columbia, Séliš, or the Dalles if you've been down to Oregon. And this is a place that has an archaeologically documented history of 15,000 years of people fishing there. Communal fishing sites that, families pass down their platforms from generation to generation, God knows how far back. 15,000 years, that's a heck of a lot of fishing. You're using dip nets there because, this place is so special for a reason. The Columbia River at the Dalles goes from almost 2 miles wide down to 75 feet at its narrowest point. You have over 30-40 million salmon swimming up the river every single year. Any river, any stream that is above those falls, every single one of those fish has to pass through that little 75-foot gap. You can literally stand on a platform above the river with a net, dip it in, and look at the size of that salmon. This picture is, if I remember correctly, from the 1950s. I put it in black and white for a reason, because that history, that place seems so long ago, right? How many of you were born in the 50s or before? This was happening in your living memory, in your lifetime. 15,000 years, and they just shoot right through it, not even realizing. But once you get below into the lower Columbia, this is really fun because salmon are anadromous, meaning they spend part of their lives in saltwater, part of their lives in freshwater. And this is the really fun part when it comes to species on the expedition, because you get so many cool and unique species. My personal favorite fish in the entire world, I even went so far as to write several papers on them when I was in college: sturgeon. North America is the largest freshwater fish, the white sturgeon. They are encountered in the lower Columbia, as well as a landlocked population here in Montana. But these suckers can get over 20 feet long and weigh over a ton. They can live a century, maybe more. I mean, just look at the picture, folks. Like, you could go to the Snake River in Idaho and drag one of those things out of the water. You can't really do that anymore because, well, they're gone, but they were there at one time. And one of my favorites that they talk about, who knows what's in the bottom right? Not bait. That is one of the tastiest fish there. Okay, so who likes anchovies? I will refrain from getting on my anchovy soapbox right now. I love them. I think that more people should use them and eat them. But why do you not like anchovies? It's because they taste too fishy. They're too oily and fatty, right? Yeah. Well, guess what? That was really enjoyed by people because it's those nutrients. And this is not an anchovy, but it's basically like the indigenous cousin of them. Say hello to the eulachon, or candlefish. They are so oily and fatty that you can literally light those suckers up when they're dry like a candle. That's why they're called candlefish. I love calling them by their name. Up in Alaska, they're called hooligans up there. Yeah, so hooligans, good fish. But they loved hooligans, actually, which is kind of surprising. I think it probably reminded them of anchovies, which were popular at the time. But again, it's all about those nutrients. Oh, they're tiny. They're literally like bigger, they're tiny fish. I mean, they're literally like Pacific sardines or anchovies, so they don't get too big. So, when they head up the Columbia in 1806, they're ironically following the path of the salmon home. And this is a lovely illustration done 40 years after Lewis and Clark by Paul Kane, a Canadian artist who came through the area, showing clubbing, spearing, and a little bit of, I think there's a dip net platform in the back, but it's so small. But just shows you people all up and down the Columbia were doing this. Like, this was life on this river. And everybody always looked forward to the different runs of salmon. The spring run, that was the hard times are over. The life of summer is coming. Fall, it's that bounty coming in before the dark times, the winter sets in, or in the case of the Pacific Northwest, everything gets overcast and rainy. And they're heading up the Columbia, they're following this river, and they get back to the Nez Perce, and they're stuck. They can't get over the Bitterroot. And it's not good. You're going to get hungry again. Well, what happened the last time you were hanging out with the Nez Perce? Cue the little puppy barks in the background. So they're waiting for spring run Chinook to come up. And that's going to be the saving grace while they're waiting to get over the mountains again. And Lewis talks about a couple guys going out fishing and nothing, just getting nothing. But two guys bring in some salmon trout, if you will. They call them all sorts of things. the way they got these fish is kind of unusual. Again, FWP people, I plead the fifth. One guy decided that, hey, we're in the Army, we got muskets. What do muskets have? We got bayonets! And so he puts his bayonet on the end of a stick, wades out into the river, and he's gonna stab himself a salmon. Well, his compatriot, not wanting to get his pants wet, decides he's going to go one step further. He's like, well, we're in the Army, we got muskets, but why use the bayonet? Just use the musket. So he decides he's going to stand on the bank and he's going to try and shoot a fish. And when they came back with those 2 salmon, who do you think caught them? Oh, no, I'm asking, who caught him, the musket guy or the bayonet guy? Raise your hands if you think bayonet. Raise your hands if you think musket. Ding, 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 musket is the winner. He got 2, bayonet got 0. How much of that was just dumb luck? I can't say. Side tangent on fishing, a lot of fishing is dumb luck. 2 parts skill, 1 part dumb luck. But Lewis is mortified when he sees what kind of fish they brought back. They're not spring run Chinook. They're steelhead. Oh, wow, Lewis, steelhead. Oh. People pay good money to go and fish spring steelhead in Idaho today. And here he is complaining about it. But ironically, this whole time, like I said, they've been following salmon home. And when they head over Lolo Trail and over Lolo Pass back down here to Travelers Rest, they ironically followed the path of a very important Séliš story. And I won't tell the whole thing because I'm pretty sure someone else is going to say it to you guys next couple weeks. But long story short, why are there no salmon in the Bitterroot? The geographic answer is there's a waterfall in the way, but the traditional story, you can blame Coyote for getting tired and lazy and setting a salmon down at the top of Lolo Pass. And, well, fish are slippery, and bada bing, bada boom. Salmon went back the other way. No fish in the Bitterroot. Maybe that's why Lewis and Clark were eating all them dogs back there. Payback. So they get down back to Travelers Rest, and they split up. Clark is going to go down into southwest Montana by the Three Forks area and eventually down the Yellowstone, passing by Livingston, Montana, one of the fly fishing capitals of the world. But Lewis is going to go up the Blackfoot River, right through the middle of where a river runs through it takes place. And, well, they filmed it on the Madison, if I remember correctly, or the Gallatin. It's in the Bozeman area. I don't care about that part of Montana. Go Grizz. But Lewis goes through the Blackfoot. He's in the middle of where a river runs through it takes place, and Goodrich is with him. You would think that this would be an amazing opportunity for fishing on the expedition. They don't fish once. Fishing gets forgotten in 1806. They are in a rush to get home. They don't want to take the time, because fishing takes time. And what's more, they start trading away fishing gear to buy salmon and roots. Like, the irony that you're trading away fishing gear to get salmon, like, what the heck, guys? But long story short, the last records of fishing, Lewis talks about heading up the Marias. He's got a couple men with him. He's in the middle of Blackfoot territory, and all they had for dinner one day while he's trying to get readings at Camp Disappointment is 1 measly trout, his exact wording, and some root mush. Yeah, not a good time for fishing up there. Clark, on the other hand, he's heading down to Yellowstone and fishes a little bit below Pompey's Pillar. Actually at another site that I've fished and caught fish at. Ironically, he caught 3 catfish too, which is pretty cool. There are 2 more recorded instances where they are stopped long enough in Nebraska where they fish for the final times, but it's a sparse record after they leave the Pacific drainage behind. And Goodrich kind of disappears after a certain point in the journals. Where we're sitting at right now, you betcha didn't know that you could thank Silas Goodrich for us knowing this place. How did we figure out that Traveler's Rest was a Lewis and Clark campsite? Mercury! Guess who was one of the 3 dudes using that Mercury? Silas. Go Silas. Good one. Bet you guys didn't know history could be fun. But he's left at the Great Falls, and that's really the last time we know anything definite about him. He returns to St. Louis with the rest of the crew. The fishing tale is over. So what the heck happens after? Well, I mentioned before that this story is one that I've had an interesting walk through history with. Because again, when I was, in Great Falls doing Lewis and Clark stuff, I was assigned the role of Silas, and it's like, great, he fished, what else? And so I've kind of made it a personal mission of mine over the last 10, 15 years to try and track this guy down and figure out how this story really ends. And it's kind of interesting. I managed to narrow down one guy who fits the bill. Yeah, I won't go into the details, but ask me about it if you're curious. But long story short, the guy has a happy life. He gets married, ends up in upstate New York, right off the Erie Canal. Ends up, ironically of all things, if some of you know me, I also have a big interest in apples. And he ends up running an apple orchard in upstate New York, right next to a nice little brook. When he dies in 1845, I found the guy's will, and he's very concerned in that will about what's going to happen to his books and his maps and his papers. This was a guy who was really interested in very Lewis and Clark adjacent topics, is what it seems. What I find really poetic is that, 1845, he's probably one of the last expedition members alive, a guy we knew nothing about. But if you were to visit that little town in New York today, there is a fish hatchery about 1.5 miles down the road from where he was at. I think that's pretty cool. But while Silas kind of gets a happy ending, it's not really that for our fish and our rivers. We've been pretty hard on them the last 200 years. This is the Great Falls today. And I can remember as a kid fishing in my hometown and always being disappointed. You wouldn't catch anything. And it's because the fish that are supposed to be there aren't there anymore. You can go to the Great Falls today and you're not going to catch a cutthroat trout. You haven't been able to for many, many years. And large-scale agriculture, ranching, things like that, they bring a lot of benefits to the state, but the environmental damage, runoff, things like that, it really changed the Great Falls area quite a bit. It was historically the warm water, cold water fishery divide. Below the falls, you'd have warm water fish. Above the falls, you'd have cold water fish. The boundary has shifted above the geographic barrier of the falls about 20, 25 miles. So now in the Great Falls immediate area, you have a warm water fishery. Without warm water fish, they physically cannot get above those falls. So it's a fishing dead zone in a lot of ways. I mean, you have to go 30, 40 minutes in any given direction to be able to have decent fishing. So for me, on a personal note, that's just, it's hard sometimes. And I think while the Missouri's been hit very hard, so too is the Columbia. In fact, probably more so. Welcome back to Séliš. This time I put the picture in color to make how close it is sink in. Again, there are people in this room, many people in this room. This was happening in your lifetime. And we destroyed 15,000 years of fishing history in a matter of hours. But that's not to say there isn't a brighter note in this story. There's hope. Because just as we've been able to really hurt our fish and we've hurt our rivers, we have a remarkable ability to help too. And I won't go into the nitty-gritty, but there's been a lot of recovery efforts with salmon in the Pacific drainage recently. There's been some dam removals, and there are already impacts of salmon swimming back up the rivers. It's incredible. And while I don't think we're going to see those big runs again in even my lifetime or even any kids of mine's lifetime, there's hope that maybe we can undo a little of the damage we've done in the last 200 years. Because at the end of the day, people love to fish. And I think so long as there's fish in the river, people who love fishing and love those fish that they're catching, there's hope. And for me, that hope is summed up in this picture right here. This is me and my little sister fishing with my grandpa many, many years ago. Because at the end of the day, I think any of us who care about fish and fishing and these stories, our ultimate hope is that everybody who comes after us gets to enjoy the rivers, the waters, like I got to do as a kid, like Norman McLean did, and like Silas Goodrich did, and countless people before them. And with that, I had to sneak in one last fish pun.
So I know we're over an hour, and we appreciate you. I'm going to let the Zoom continue to roll and see if people online have questions, but I'm sure that Austin would be happy to take questions from the room as well. Yes?
I'm sorry for how long-winded I am. I can spin a good fishtail. Anybody? Oh, yes.
Good job.
Thanks, Robert. Yes.
Is there a book that sort of says what you've said?
There will be.
Well, unfortunately, this fishing tale is one that hasn't been written down yet. This is kind of the result of 15 years of nerd and research that I've done kind of on my own in and around the subject. The subject. I need more coffee, geez.
So are you going to pursue a book?
What's that?
So do you have the ambition to want to put it on paper?
I have the ambition, it's just whether or not I have the time. But if something does happen, I would love to get it out there for people. So, yes.
You talked about the platforms being passed on from generation to
Yeah.
generation. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so they would be passed in the family to the next generation of fishermen. So I was actually just a couple years ago on the Klickitat River, not too far from the Dalles, and you can still see fish platforms in and around tribal communities in the Columbia Basin. They're still doing it. Every so often you do gotta build a new platform because, well, you know, things get old and they break down, but the spot, the fishing spot, and the rights to fish there are passed down through families. So you can purchase the rights if you wish, but you got to make a good gift to do that. Because how many of you folks have like a favorite fishing hole? How many of you told a bunch of people where it is? Exactly. Fishermen are the same all around the world. Anybody else? Yeah.
You talked about the person that you think Silas, like, you
Yeah.
that's kind of ambiguous. Is it that guy or is it someone like you can?
Well, much much like there are many John Smiths in the world, there are several Silas Goodriches. And if you notice, the second resource I put on there is the Goodrich Family Association. A bunch of nerdy genealogists just like me. They have records on just about every Goodrich who has set foot in this continent. And so I can't even remember when I did this. I reached out to them and be like, hey, can you give me all the Silases that you got? And so they gave me a list of like a dozen guys. And so I just went one by one and narrowed them down until I got to 3 that were all the right age. Because, like, you know, if someone's like 50, 60 years old, you know, they're not with Lewis and Clark. Somebody born in after 1806 is definitely not with Lewis and Clark. So I tracked it down to 3 guys. One of them was dead. Definitely not him. And so I had to track down the other 2. One of them had kids in 1804, 1805, and 1806. He was also in medical school. Probably not him. So that left 1. But that wasn't good enough, so I had to track him down and see what his life was like. He's got very suspicious gaps. He disappears from his hometown in 1799 and doesn't show up again until 1808. There was a record of enlistment in the U.S. Army of this guy and his brother in 1799. We know that the Expedition Silas came out of the U.S. military. And I just was able to track down enough little gaps to be like, all right, this is the guy. What happened to him? And it was surreal reading that will. His sons were not very happy with how it was divvied out, so they kind of took it to court. So we literally have a day-by-day play of his last week of life. And apparently he was very fond of jokes. I saw that. I'm like, that's my guy. But, yeah, very fond of jokes. Apparently one of his neighbors talked about how he used to tell stories, and one of them would be where he'd get on all fours on the floor and put, like, pack saddlebags on and pretend like he was going over somewhere. And I'm like, is that man making light of the Lolo Trail? I kind of think he was, but it's just been fun bringing this guy back from, you know, the mists of history.
Follow up on that. You said he was concerned about papers and maps and things.
Yep.
And does anybody know what happened to said papers and maps?
I'm trying to track down living relatives. Yeah. Oh, I got 2. I'll go with my right side, and then I'll go with my left.
I've heard a couple interpretations of Lolo. The main one, no salmon, but there have been a couple of others. Do you have insight on that?
That is a tangent and a half that I might throw to Molly. Basically, the Séliš name for it does translate to no salmon. The Lolo name itself, it's anybody's guess. I've heard theories that it comes from a trapper who was in the area who got killed by a grizzly bear. I can't really tell you, but definitely ask Molly.
I'm gonna throw myself into the breach here.
Oh boy.
Sorry. So, sorry.
So the Salish name for this area is Timsum Clee, which means new salmon. Lolo could be a reference to a trapper named Laurence, a French trapper. So Lolo would have been a shortening of the name Laurence. But my personal favorite theory on it is that in the indigenous trade language from the Pacific into the plains, there was a very specific language created just for trade among tribes that might not speak the same language. But in that language, the word Lolo basically means to carry or to schlep. I love the word schlep. But since the Lolo Trail is a place where people carried lots of goods for trade across the mountains, that's one of the theories of why this area is called Lolo, because this was a place you carried things to trade. If you go back on our winter storytelling website, a few years ago, a scholar by the name of Kevin O'Brien tells that story and about his research and why he thinks that's how we come up with Lolo. So, there you go.
Yeah. Where was the orchard in New York? Oh boy, if I tell you guys might beat me to the punch. I'm just kidding. So, not far from the Finger Lakes. So, if you've ever been to the area around, Elbridge, New York, maybe not. Don't you dare go there before me. But he was outside of Elbridge, New York. So there's still a lot of apples in the area. So, oh yeah, the Big Apple. Yes,
Is this presentation recorded?
yes.
Oh,
You'll be able to see the recording or download it, a link to it from our website probably in a week. Ron has been recording for us today, and we will load it up as soon as we get it. Cool. All right. I think that's it, everybody.
Yeah, if you want to check out some historic fishing gear, please come on up.